Joining me now to discuss this and more, and to translate what has been a very difficult 10 or days or so, foreign editor at the Australian, Greg Sheridan. As I said, Greg, help translate Trump economics for us here. He's announced that backflip, the 90-day pause, after more than 75 countries asked to negotiate. What's your read of this?
Well, Peter, great to be with you. This has been very messy from Trump. It's not inconceivable he'll get a halfway decent result out of it, but there's a tremendous cost in the disruption and a tremendous cost to his credibility and to American credibility. He imposed these tariffs. His administration was at war with itself. His best friend, Elon Musk, was calling his trade advisor, Peter Navarro, a moron. And no human being in history has wiped so many trillions of dollars of wealth out of existence as Trump did with one day of those tariffs. But then in another day, he removed those tariffs and then created trillions of dollars of wealth. Now, I think all the countries who have escaped tariffs will do beneficial deals with the US. And so there's some progress there, but at enormous cost. Now, with China, tariffs against China are well justified by the US, well justified. However, it's inconceivable that they'll remain at 125% and Chinese tariffs against the US at 84%. My guess is that there will be a deal between China and the US in the not very distant future. And 2 points I'd make about that. One is the global markets would not have recovered so strongly if they didn't think there was going to be some kind of US-China deal. And you know, the sad truth is the last time Trump and China did a deal was not very good for the US. The Chinese didn't uphold their end of the bargain, and the US trade deficit with China was just as big as ever, and Chinese behaviour didn't change. Now, Trump is all tactics and no strategy, in my opinion, and this has been very, very messy. But one good thing about Trump, he has no ideological consistency and no real ideological beliefs. So when he gets to a point where his policies are a disaster, he simply declares victory and moves in the opposite direction.
Yeah, look, it's a bit like sausages, right? You don't want to see them being made, but we all like a sausage, particularly on election day. He is a brawler, right? That's his commercial, mercantile character. And in the end, if he gets the outcome, if he gets a deal with China that takes the US forward further than where it was in trade terms when he was elected, isn't that in the long term a win?
Possibly. It depends how much better the deal really is. So when Trump makes as big a mess as he's made here, he was in danger of losing Republican congressmen. His approval ratings are the worst of any president at this time in his term. The only president who comes near to having approval ratings as bad as this stage of his first term was Donald Trump in the first round. And then, oddly enough, really, the pressure gets on him to make a deal. So we saw this 4 years ago. He had a brawl with Canada, then he made a deal with Canada and Mexico, which was really just the NAFTA deal under a new name. And he negotiated that deal, and then he ripped it up this time. Now, global trade needs some stability. There is a cost in the disruption. If he moves really forward with China, and that's a net benefit, then you've got to put that benefit against the disruption. And if it's a big benefit, then it was worth the disruption. But the Chinese have a long history of basically not honouring their deals with Trump. Trump is so obsessed with getting the deal and the optics of a deal and everything that it's not always that, whereas the good elements of his policy, reduced energy prices, deregulation, tax cuts, that can power an American economic boom. But I don't think you can look at this tariff episode as anything other than pretty disastrous from Trump so far.
So this has been a rare federal election in Australia when international issues have interrupted the political play. I haven't seen that for a long time. Of course, we've had quite a bit on China. I'll get to China in a moment. But Trump has been used, particularly by Labor, to try and drag down Peter Dutton. I have a feeling that this 90-day reprieve will take Trump sort of out of the equation, at least domestically, before the 3rd of May. Now, Labor are not going to like that. And of course, the more they talk about Trump, Labor, the less the Prime Minister is held to account for his China support, his China pro-China commentary, but also, I think dangerously, Greg Sheridan, is the fact that the China media is really pumping up his tyres. Now, you know, my side of politics, if Beijing was out there being your best advertising spin in a campaign, that's a bad thing.
Well, you're absolutely right, Peter. So I think Trump has been a serious negative for Dutton, a serious negative. It's not Dutton's fault. I don't think Dutton has run a brilliant campaign or anything, but it's not his fault. Trump is hurting every centre-right politician in the world, and he's helping every centre-left politician in the world. You know, this is overshadowing the campaign. But I think you're right. The 90-day pause will reduce the salience of Trump in Australian politics. I think Albanese and Dutton both have been pretty sensible in the way they've responded to the Trump stuff, pretty low-key, disagreeing with the tariffs, but not personally criticising Trump and not imposing retaliatory tariffs. With the Chinese stuff, so the government today did reject the Chinese proposition that we're going to join hands and become kumbaya allies with China. Well, that's the very minimum they could have done. But the Chinese be very, very happy with the Albanese government overall. They sent military ships to humiliate Australia. They get no response. That shows how weak Australia is. And I think they intentionally humiliated Albanese when they first called him a handsome boy, and it's demeaning and contemptuous. And I think that's quite intentional. They're not trying to hurt him. They're quite happy with him, but they are showing their absolute contempt for Australia and for all its little power games. After all, everyone in the world is increasing their defence budget to cope with Russia and China. The Europeans massively so, the Japanese, the British, even dear old New Zealand has doubled its defence budget. We get a Chinese gunboat diplomacy exercise in our waters, and we do nothing on defence. So I think Beijing would be very, very happy with the performance of the Albanese government.